The alarm bells rang through every space station and ship across the galaxy. The emergency channel crackled to life with a sound that made even the toughest alien warriors stop what they were doing. It was crying. Not just any crying, but the desperate sobs of an entire species about to die. The Zilani were known throughout the galaxy as the Gentle Ones. They looked like living crystals, tall and thin, with bodies that sparkled like diamonds in sunlight. They never fought wars. They never hurt anyone. All they wanted was to mine precious stones on their quiet little world and live in peace. But peace had just ended for them. "Please, anyone who can hear this," came the broken voice through the speakers. "The Krex ships came 3 days ago. They killed our leaders. They're hunting us like animals. We're hiding in the deep caves, but they're coming closer. We have children here. Babies. They're so scared." Captain Mike Thompson stood on the bridge of his ship, the Defiant. He was a big man with rough hands and scars on his face from 20 years of exploring dangerous worlds. His gray hair was cut short, military style. He'd seen a lot of bad things in space, but this message hit him hard. Around the galaxy, other ships were getting the same message. The proud bird like Astari folded their wings and shook their heads sadly. "Too dangerous," they said. The massive Gorlak, who looked like walking mountains, growled and turned away. "Not our problem," they decided. Even the smart Vectari, with their big brains and fancy technology, just ran their calculations and determined it wasn't worth the risk. The Krex Dominion was bad news. Really bad news. They traveled from world to world, taking whatever they wanted and enslaving anyone who got in their way. They had huge ships with powerful weapons and soldiers who enjoyed causing pain. Most species just hid when the Krex came around. "The Galactic Council is meeting now," reported Lieutenant Lisa Parker from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that usually sparkled with curiosity. Today those eyes were full of anger. "They're arguing about what to do. The earliest they could send help would be 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Thompson's voice was low and dangerous. "Those people will be dead or enslaved in 3 days. The bridge of the Defiant wasn't fancy like the alien ships. Everything was built tough and practical. Thick metal walls, sturdy chairs, and controls that could take a beating. It looked more like a submarine than a spaceship. The humans liked it that way. Pretty things broke too easily." Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez looked up from his navigation station. He was short and stocky, with calloused hands from working on engines. "Sir, Earth Command just sent new orders. All human ships are supposed to stay where we are. They don't want any trouble with the Krex." Thompson felt his jaw tighten. He looked around at his crew. 200 humans, all volunteers who had signed up to explore the dangerous parts of space that other species couldn't handle. They came from all over Earth. Farmers from Kansas, fishermen from Alaska, miners from Colorado, and soldiers from every country. "What do you think about those orders?" Thompson asked his crew. "Honestly, sir," said Chief Engineer Betty Walsh, wiping grease off her hands with a dirty rag. She was a grandmother from Texas who could fix any machine ever built. "I think Earth Command is sitting safe behind their desks while innocent people are dying." Nods and murmurs of agreement came from around the bridge. These weren't the kind of humans who backed down from a fight, especially when children were in danger. Thompson walked to the big screen showing the galaxy map. The Zilani world was marked with a flashing red dot. It was far away, in a dangerous part of space where most species wouldn't go. The planet itself was listed as a death world in the galactic databases. High gravity, poisonous air, deadly storms, and creatures that could tear apart most alien species. Perfect for humans. "Listen up, everyone," Thompson announced over the ship's communication system. His voice reached every corner of the Defiant, from the engine rooms to the sleeping quarters. "We've all heard the message. Innocent people are dying, and nobody else is going to help them. I'm not ordering anyone to come with me, but I'm going to that planet. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship can do so now. He waited. The bridge was quiet except for the humming of the engines. Lieutenant Parker stood up first. I'm with you, Captain. Chief Walsh smiled. Those Solani sound like good people. Good people deserve help. One by one, every single crew member confirmed they were staying. Thompson felt proud but not surprised. This was what humans did. When someone needed help, they helped. It didn't matter if it was dangerous or stupid or against orders. Set course for Kepler 442c, Thompson ordered. Maximum speed. As the Defiant turned toward the distant world, Thompson thought about what they were heading into. The Kreks had bigger ships and more weapons. They had the advantage of numbers and position. Any smart military commander would say this mission was suicide. But the Kreks had never fought humans before. They had never faced a species that treated deadly worlds like vacation spots. They were about to learn why Earth was labeled as the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, and why the creatures who lived there were the toughest in the universe. The hunt was about to begin. General Vorthak sat in his command chair aboard the massive Kreks warship, watching his forces hunt the crystal people below. He was huge, even for a Kreks, standing nearly 10 feet tall with thick gray skin covered in battle scars. His 4 arms moved constantly as he gave orders, and his red eyes glowed with cruel satisfaction. The Zilani were proving harder to catch than expected, but that just made the hunt more fun for his soldiers. They had driven most of the crystal people deep into the planet's cave systems, where the acid rain couldn't reach them. But it was only a matter of time. The Kreks always won in the end. General, called out his communications officer, a smaller Kreks with nervous twitches. There's a ship approaching from the outer system. Unknown design. Vorthak barely looked at the screen. Probably some scavenger hoping to pick through the wreckage when we're done. What species? The database says, humans, sir. From a planet called Earth. There's almost no information about them. Then they're nobody important, Vorthak growled. One ship against my entire fleet. They'll probably turn around and run once they see what they're dealing with. But the human ship didn't turn around. The Defiant came straight toward the planet like it had every right to be there. Vorthak watched with growing irritation as the crude-looking vessel ignored his warning signals and headed directly into the planet's atmosphere. Should we destroy them, General? Asked his weapons officer. Let them land, Vorthak said with a nasty laugh. The planet will kill them for us. No species can survive down there for more than a few hours. The gravity alone will crush their bones. Down on the planet's surface, the Defiant touched down in a clearing surrounded by twisted metal trees that leaked poisonous sap. The ship's landing gear sank deep into the soft ground as the crushing gravity took hold. Storm clouds gathered overhead, promising another acid rain shower within the hour. Sergeant Tom Anderson checked his gear one final time before stepping out of the shuttle. He was a big man, built like a construction worker, with hands that could crush steel. He'd grown up on a mining station where the artificial gravity was set to twice Earth normal just to keep the workers strong. This planet's triple gravity felt heavy, but manageable. All right, people, he said to his squad over the radio. Just like training back home. Watch your step, watch your air supply, and watch each other's backs. The Kreks think this place will kill us. Let's prove them wrong. The first step outside was always the worst. The air was thick and smelled like rotten eggs mixed with burning plastic. The gravity hit them like a heavy blanket, making every movement require extra effort. Most alien species would have collapsed immediately, but these were humans. They'd evolved on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Corporal Jenny Martinez moved through the twisted forest like she was taking a walk in the park. She was small and quick, a former rock climber who'd spent her childhood scaling cliffs in storms. The alien vegetation that would slice through most creatures' skin barely scratched her reinforced suit. Movement ahead, she whispered into her radio. Looks like Zalani hiding in that cave entrance. Through her scope, she could see them. 3 adult Zalani huddled around what looked like children, their crystal bodies dim with fear and exhaustion. They were beautiful creatures, like living works of art, but they were clearly not built for this harsh world. Their home planet must have been gentle and peaceful. Krek's patrol incoming from the west, warned Private Kevin Brooks from his position on a ridge. Looks like they're having trouble with the terrain. Anderson smiled grimly as he watched the Krek soldiers struggling through the forest. Their heavy armor, designed to intimidate peaceful species, was working against them here. They moved slowly, carefully, afraid of the environment around them. Every few minutes, one would stumble or get caught on the toxic plants. They're scared of this place, Anderson realized. They're used to fighting on nice, safe garden worlds where the biggest danger is maybe a butterfly. They have no idea how to operate in a real combat environment. The acid rain started falling just as Anderson's squad reached the cave entrance. The Zalani saw them coming and huddled together in terror, probably thinking these were more enemies. But when Anderson removed his helmet, showing his human face, something changed in their crystalline features. "Don't worry," Anderson said gently, though he knew they probably couldn't understand him. "We're here to help." Jenny Martinez was already moving past them, heading deeper into the cave system where her thermal sensors showed more Zalani hiding. The acid rain that was melting the Krek's equipment rolled off her suit like water. She'd been caught in worse storms during hurricane season back home in Florida. "Found them," she reported. "Looks like about 20 civilians, including youngsters. Some of them are hurt pretty bad." Anderson looked back toward where the Krek's patrol was still struggling through the forest. They'd taken shelter under some metal trees, waiting for the acid rain to stop. Their equipment was smoking and sparking where the rain had touched it. These weren't soldiers adapted for harsh environments. They were bullies who were used to easy victories against defenseless opponents. "Base, this is Anderson," he called back to the Defiant. "The Kreks down here aren't the problem we thought they'd be. They're city fighters, not wilderness troops. This environment is working in our favor." Captain Thompson's voice came back steady and confident. "Copy that, Sergeant. How are the civilians?" "Scared but alive. We're going to need medical support for the wounded ones." "And Captain?" Anderson paused as he watched a Krek soldier slip and fall in the mud, his expensive armor now covered in toxic sludge. "I think we might have bitten off exactly the right amount this time." As more human squads landed across the planet, a pattern was becoming clear. The Kreks, for all their advanced technology and military might, had never learned to fight in truly hostile conditions. They were conquerors of peaceful worlds, not survivors of death worlds. But the humans? This was just another Tuesday for them. They were finally home. Staff Sergeant Rick Williams had been hunting dangerous things his whole life. Growing up in the mountains of Montana, he tracked bears, wolves, and mountain lions through terrain that would break most people. Now, crouched behind the twisted remains of what used to be a beautiful Zalani crystal garden, he was hunting something much more dangerous. The Krek's patrol moved through the ruins like they were walking through a minefield. Which, Rick realized with dark humor, they basically were. This whole planet was one big minefield for anyone who wasn't built tough enough to handle it. Through his scope, he watched 5 Krek soldiers stumbling around in their bulky environmental suits. The suits looked expensive and high-tech, but they were clearly designed for show more than function. Every few steps, one of the aliens would stop and check their equipment, probably wondering why their fancy gear kept malfunctioning in the radiation. "Target acquired," Rick whispered into his radio. His voice was calm, like he was commenting on the weather. 5 bogies moving east toward the refugee cave. "They're struggling with the terrain." "Copy that, Williams," came the reply from his spotter, Corporal Danny Foster, who was positioned on a ridge about 50 meters away. "I've got eyes on 3 more patrols in the valley. None of them look like they're having fun." Rick smiled grimly as he watched the lead Krek soldier try to climb over a pile of rubble. The alien's heavy armor made him clumsy, and the triple gravity wasn't helping. Back on their home worlds, these Kreks were probably feared warriors. Here, they looked like children playing dress-up in their parents' clothes. They remind me of those city hunters back home, Rick said quietly. You know, the ones who show up in the woods wearing brand new gear they don't know how to use, thinking they're tough because they bought expensive equipment. The difference was, those city hunters were just embarrassing. These Kreks were murderers who had been terrorizing peaceful species for generations. Rick felt no sympathy as he lined up his shot. Meanwhile, about 2 kilometers away, Dr. Helen Roberts was elbow-deep in the most fascinating medical case of her career. The wounded Zelani lying on her makeshift operating table looked like a sculpture made of living sapphire, beautiful even while suffering from terrible injuries. "Hold still, sweetie," she murmured to the young Zelani, whose leg had been shattered by Krek's weapons. "I know this is scary, but I'm going to help you feel better." Helen had been a combat medic for 12 years before becoming a xenobiologist. She'd patched up soldiers in the middle of firefights, performed surgery in earthquakes, and once delivered a baby during a hurricane. The sound of explosions and gunfire outside her medical tent was just background noise to her now. The Zelani's biology was unlike anything in her textbooks, but Helen's steady hands worked by instinct. Their crystal-like structure conducted energy differently than organic tissue, but pain was pain, and healing was healing, no matter what species you were dealing with. "BP is stabilizing," she called out to her assistant, Medic First Class Tony Garcia, who was treating another wounded Zelani nearby. "Their nervous system is actually more resilient than I thought. These people are tougher than they look." A massive explosion shook the ground outside, close enough to rattle the medical equipment. Helen didn't even flinch. She'd worked through worse. High above the planet, Chief Petty Officer Nathan Brooks sat in the Defiance Command Center, surrounded by screens showing the tactical situation. He'd been coordinating military operations for 15 years, but this was unlike anything he'd ever seen. "Captain," he reported to Thompson, who was reviewing battle plans at the next station over. "Our people are moving through areas that the Kreks won't even go near. Radiation zones, active minefields, unstable terrain, it's like the planet itself is on our side." Thompson leaned over to look at Nathan's screens. Red dots showed Krek's positions retreating steadily from blue dots representing human forces. It looked like the aliens were being pushed back across the entire continent. "What's their casualty rate?" Thompson asked. "That's the interesting part, sir," Nathan replied, pulling up another screen. "They're not taking heavy casualties. They're just leaving. Every time our people move into an area the Kreks consider too dangerous, the aliens abandon their positions and fall back." On one screen, Nathan could see a human squad walking casually through what the Kreks had marked as a severe radiation hazard zone. The humans' equipment was older and simpler than the advanced Kreks gear, but it kept working. When the electromagnetic storms hit and fried the aliens' sophisticated electronics, the humans just switched to backup systems and kept going. "Look at this," Nathan said, highlighting a section of the map. Patrol 7 just walked through an active minefield that had the Kreks completely blocked. They're treating it like a nature hike. The pattern was becoming clear across the entire planet. The Kreks had built their military around conquering civilized worlds with predictable conditions. They had the best weapons, the most advanced technology, and overwhelming numbers. What they didn't have was the ability to function when everything went wrong at once. But humans? Humans had evolved on a world where everything went wrong constantly. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, Earth had thrown everything it could at humanity for millions of years. The survivors had passed down one crucial trait, the ability to adapt and keep fighting no matter how bad things got. Sergeant Williams finally took his shot. The Krek's patrol leader went down instantly, and the other 4 aliens scattered in panic. But instead of taking cover and returning fire like trained soldiers would, they ran. They ran from an enemy they couldn't see, through terrain they couldn't handle, toward positions they couldn't hold. Targets are retreating, Williams reported calmly. Pursuing is unnecessary. They're running straight into Johnson's squad about half a click east. Copy that, came the reply. Johnson's people are ready for them. Across the planet, the same scene was playing out dozens of times. The mighty Krex military, terror of the galaxy, was being systematically dismantled by a species they'd never heard of. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through simple, stubborn refusal to quit when things got tough. The hunters had indeed become the hunted, but more than that, they discovered they were never really hunters at all. They were just bullies who had finally picked on someone their own size. And humans, as it turned out, were very good at dealing with bullies. Captain Mike Thompson stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays that showed human forces advancing across the planet like a flood. 3 days ago, the Krex had controlled 90% of the world's surface. Now they were down to less than 20%, and that number was dropping fast. The Defiant looked like it had been through a blender. Scorch marks covered the hull where Krex energy weapons had hit, and half the ship's external sensors were gone. But she was still flying, still fighting, and her crew was angrier than ever. Status report, Thompson called out. Commander Jake Sullivan turned from his station, a wide grin on his scarred face. Jake had been a Navy pilot before joining the Exploration Service, and he'd never lost his love for a good fight. Sir, our ramming attacks have broken their orbital formation completely. Turns out their fancy ships can't handle getting hit by something built like a brick outhouse. The human ship had been designed for asteroid mining, which meant it was built to survive collisions with Space Orcs traveling at incredible speeds. The elegant Krex warships, designed to look impressive while bullying defenseless targets, crumpled like tin cans when the Defiant rammed into them. Their fighters are pulling back to defend the main fleet, Jake continued. I don't think they know how to deal with an enemy that uses ramming as a primary tactic. Down on the planet's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Hayes was having the time of her life. She'd been a Marine for 20 years, serving in conflicts across known space, but this was different. This time, she wasn't just following orders, she was saving innocent lives. Base, this is Hayes, she reported over the radio while ducking behind cover as Krex energy bolts flew overhead. The southern continent is almost clear. The Zilani civilians are reporting that most Krex ground forces abandoned their positions during the night. Sandra had seen this pattern before, back when she was fighting pirates in the outer colonies. Bullies were tough when they were winning, but the moment someone hit back harder than they expected, they folded like paper. Ma'am, called out Sergeant Tim Rodriguez from his position near a captured Krex outpost, you need to see this. The Zilani are asking if they can help with the fighting. Sandra smiled as she looked toward the crystal people emerging from their hiding places. For days, they'd been terrorized victims. Now, seeing their rescuers pushing back the monsters who'd hurt them, they wanted to join the fight. That's where Chief Engineer Bobby Clark came in. Bobby was a genius with machinery, the kind of guy who could fix a broken engine with spare parts and pure stubbornness. When he'd seen the advanced Zilani mining equipment sitting and used in their abandoned settlements, his engineer's brain had started working overtime. Check this out, Bobby said proudly, patting a massive mining laser that he'd mounted on a mobile platform. The Zilani use these things to cut through solid rock. With a few modifications, they'll cut through Krex armor just as easy. The Crystal people learned quickly. Gunnery Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, a tough woman from Texas who'd trained recruits for 15 years, found that the Zilani were natural students once they got over their fear. They're smarter than most human recruits, Maria admitted to Hayes over the radio. Give them simple, clear instructions, and they follow them perfectly. Plus, they know this planet better than anyone. They're showing us shortcuts and hidden paths the Krex never found. The tide of battle was turning so fast that even the humans were surprised. What had started as a desperate rescue mission was becoming a complete victory. The Krex forces, used to easy conquests against peaceful species, had no idea how to handle an enemy that got tougher the harder you hit them. But up in orbit, General Vorthak was watching his military reputation crumble in real time. The massive Krex leader paced his command bridge like a caged animal, his 4 arms gesturing wildly as he screamed orders at his subordinates. "How are we losing to primitives?" he roared. "Their ship looks like it was built in a scrapyard. Their weapons are hundreds of years behind ours." His communications officer, a nervous creature who'd been trying to stay invisible, finally spoke up. "General, perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal. We could regroup and return with a larger force." "No." Vorthak's bellow echoed through the bridge. "I will not retreat from unknown aliens who crawled out of some backward system. We are the Krex Dominion. We have conquered 100 worlds." But even as he spoke, another report came in. Human ground forces had broken through the last major Krex defensive position. The orbital defense platforms were offline. Half his fleet was either destroyed or so badly damaged they could barely move. The general's pride, built over decades of easy victories against defenseless opponents, couldn't handle the reality of what was happening. These humans weren't supposed to exist. Species from Deathworlds were supposed to be primitive savages, not organized military forces with tactics and equipment that actually worked. "Sir," his weapons officer said quietly, "the humans are broadcasting surrender terms. They're offering to let our forces withdraw if we leave the Zilani alone and never return to this system." Vorthak's red eyes blazed with fury. Surrender terms? From primitives? The humiliation would follow him for the rest of his career. No other Krex commander would ever respect him again. He'd become a joke, the general who lost to unknowns. "Activate the planet killer," he said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Even his own officers stared at him in shock. "Sir," the weapons officer stammered, "that will destroy everything on the planet. Our own forces, the Zilani, the humans, everything. If I can't have this world," Vorthak snarled, "then no one can." On the Defiant, Lieutenant Lisa Parker was monitoring Krex communications when her screen suddenly lit up with warning signals. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with alarm. "Massive energy buildup from the Krex flagship. Power levels are off the charts." Thompson moved to her station, studying the readings. He'd seen weapons like this before, in intelligence briefings about Krex military capabilities. Planet killers, weapons designed to crack worlds open from orbit. "How long until it fires?" he asked. "Maybe 10 minutes, sir. Once it's fully charged, it'll sterilize the entire planet." Thompson looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They'd come here to save lives. Now, because of one alien's wounded pride, billions of Zilani were about to die anyway, along with every human on the surface. The captain's jaw tightened as he made his decision. Sometimes, saving others meant making the ultimate sacrifice. "All hands," he announced over the ship's communication system, "prepare for final assault on the Krex flagship. This is not a drill." The Defiant groaned and shook as Captain Mike Thompson pushed every system past its breaking point. The ship's engines, built to move massive chunks of asteroid ore, roared like caged beasts as they drove the vessel straight toward the Krex flagship. Warning lights flashed red across every console, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Thompson stood at the center of his bridge, hands gripping the command chair as he watched the massive enemy ship grow larger on the main screen. The Krex flagship was 3 times the size of the Defiant, bristling with weapons and covered in thick armor plating. But size didn't matter now. Physics was on humanity's side. "Engineering, give me everything you've got," Thompson called out. Chief Engineer Bobby Clark's voice came back over the radio, steady despite the chaos around him. "Captain, I'm reading stress fractures all along the hull. The engines are already running at 120%. If I push them any harder, we might blow up before we reach the target." "Then give me 119%, Thompson replied. "We only need to hold together for 5 more minutes." Around the bridge, his crew worked with the calm precision of people who had already accepted their fate. Lieutenant Lisa Parker plotted the intercept course with mathematical perfection, her fingers dancing across navigation controls even as sparks flew from overloaded circuits beside her. She was 26 years old, fresh out of the academy, with her whole life ahead of her. But she didn't hesitate. "Course locked in, Captain," she reported. "Impact in 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The ship's communication system crackled to life as Thompson opened a channel to the entire crew. 200 souls aboard the Defiant, all volunteers who had signed up to explore the dangerous parts of space that other species avoided. "All hands, this is the captain," Thompson announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "I want everyone not essential to this final run to get to the shuttles immediately. Take our Zilani friends with you and get as far away from this ship as possible. That's a direct order." For a moment, there was silence. Then Commander Jake Sullivan's voice came over the radio from the weapons station, where he was preparing the ship's mining charges for maximum impact. "Respectfully, sir," Jake said with that same easy grin in his voice that had gotten him through a dozen space battles, "I think we've got a job to finish here." One by one, the senior staff checked in. "Parker at navigation, I'm staying, Captain. Someone needs to keep us on target. Chief Clark in engineering, these engines need a steady hand, sir. I'm not going anywhere. Dr. Helen Roberts from the medical bay, I've got wounded Zilani who can't be moved, Captain. We're all staying together." Thompson felt his throat tighten with pride. He'd served with good people before, brave people, but this was different. These weren't soldiers following orders. These were ordinary humans who had chosen to be heroes. "Sir," reported Gunnery Sergeant Maria Gonzalez over the radio, "most of the shuttles have launched, but about half the crew refused to leave. They're saying they came here to save the Zilani, and they're going to see it through to the end." Down in the shuttle bay, the scene was chaos and beauty mixed together. Dozens of crystal-like Zilani huddled together in the small human shuttles, their bodies dim with fear and confusion. They didn't understand the human language, but they could feel the emotions of their rescuers. These strange creatures from the death world were giving their lives to save people they had never met before. Young Zilani children pressed their faces against the shuttle windows, watching the ship that had become their refuge prepare for its final mission. Their parents tried to explain what was happening, but how do you tell a child that heroes are real, and sometimes heroes have to die to save others? The Defiant was 3 minutes from impact when the Krex finally realized what was happening. General Vorthak's voice came screaming over the communication channels, demanding that the humans stop their suicide run. His weapons officers opened fire with everything they had, filling space with energy beams and missile explosions. But the human ship was built like a mountain. Krex weapons that could slice through normal vessels barely scratched the Defiant's reinforced hull. The mining ship had been designed to survive collisions with asteroid fragments traveling at incredible speeds. Enemy fire was just another occupational hazard. 2 minutes to impact, Parker announced calmly, as if she were reporting the weather. "All systems holding steady." Thompson looked around his bridge one last time. These people, his people, had volunteered for exploration duty because they wanted to see what was out there in the dark between stars. They'd found something worth dying for. "It's been an honor serving with all of you," Thompson said over the ship's communication system. The collision, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The Defiant, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, struck the Krex flagship like the fist of an angry god. The explosion lit up the entire system, a brief new star that burned brighter than the local sun for almost 30 seconds. The planet-killer weapon, half-charged and unstable, added its own energy to the blast. The Krex flagship simply ceased to exist, along with 2 nearby escort ships that were caught in the explosion. The remaining Krex fleet, their command structure gone and their will shattered, scattered in every direction. They'd come here expecting an easy conquest of peaceful crystal farmers. Instead, they'd met a species that chose death before dishonor, creatures who would sacrifice everything to protect strangers. Within hours, Krek's ships were jumping to hyperspace, fleeing a system they would never return to. The word spread quickly through their empire: avoid the humans. They were insane. 3 days later, the Galactic Council's peacekeeping fleet finally arrived. They found a world at peace, where crystal people were rebuilding their settlements with help from the surviving human rescue teams. The shuttles from the Defiant had returned to the surface, carrying both species working together to heal the wounds of war. The council representatives, proud beings from a dozen different species, offered the humans rewards, territory, technology, membership in their organization. The surviving humans, led by Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Hayes, politely declined everything except one request. "We want protected status for the Zilani," Hayes told the council. "Full protection. If anyone threatens them again, they get to deal with Earth." The council agreed immediately. They'd seen the battle reports. They'd watched a single human ship destroy a Krek's flagship through sheer determination and courage. Earth was officially reclassified as a protected death world that day, and humanity became the unofficial guardians of endangered species across the galaxy. Because that's what humans do. When someone calls for help, they answer. No matter how far away, no matter how dangerous, no matter the cost. The children of Earth had found their purpose among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.